And so in those early days and you're making some of the first investments, what were some of the criteria that hit the check boxes for some of the early winners? Was it the team? You're looking at, we talked about markets a little bit. I mean, what patterns did those first early companies have?
Welcome to the Cowles Ventures Podcast.
Yeah. Ready to jump in?
I'm ready to go.
Okay. The master podcaster, because you've been on a couple. I listened to one of your early ones. I don't know when the last one is, but yeah, thank you for being on the show.
Delighted to be here.
You're a busy guy, so I was glad I could pin you down.
This will be fun.
Yeah, it'll be good. I'm excited to kind of learn and for you to tell your story kind of holistically, because a lot of people know you for SAA, for Ignite, for Startup Weekend. I mean, your KickStart funds. I mean, that's kind of what main Tom is now. And I think we're going to kind of talk about holistically, the whole journey to get there, details, days. I mean, all of it. So you've got a big story. If you just want to kind of, intro yourself. I mean, kind of just did a little intro for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brief or long?
Whatever you're feeling.
I was born in Spokane. No, I am from Spokane, born and raised here, which is why I have so much passion for the city. Yeah. I've always liked Spokane, but went to Lewis and Clark High School, then went to the University of Washington. I never knew any other colleges existed because my parents, my grandparents, and all my older brothers went to the UW.
Oh, okay.
Went there and majored in accounting and immediately came back to Spokane. Always loved Spokane, and worked for 3 years for what was then Deloitte Haskins and Sells, one of the big 8 accounting firms. Yep. I got a little restless though. I was all of like 22 years old, and I was married, had a dog, a station wagon, a house, and I was a CPA. Eesh. And one day I kind of decided, you know what, I'm taking this life stuff probably a little too seriously. So I thought, what can I do to be a bit more adventurous without messing up my resume? Business school came to my mind. So applied, got accepted to Wharton, and spent the next couple of years at Wharton, which was a great experience. I'd never been further east than Missoula, Montana.
Yeah.
And having been a CPA and kind of understanding numbers, frankly, I found Wharton to be relatively easy, but it was a great grooming experience. Nice. I was hanging around people that had gone to fancy, Ivy League schools and worked at investment banking firms and consulting firms, a whole new language to me. So it was a great grooming school. When I was in business school, everybody was talking about investment banking. I didn't really know what an investment banker did, but it sounded like a fun profession, so that's what I decided I wanted to do. Of course, I wanted to come back to Spokane, but not a lot of investment banking possibilities in Spokane.
Yeah, are there any investment banking firms?
Probably none. Yeah. Probably none. But I did land with a firm that had an office in Seattle. Called back then it was called Dane Bosworth, and they had a leading corporate finance office in Seattle, and joined that and was mentored by some tremendous people. And it was a great time to be in Seattle because Seattle was kind of coming on the map as a tech hub, and also the markets were very effervescent. This is kind of the late 80s, early 90s. Lots of IPOs and venture financings and mergers and acquisitions. And I got to know all the players at the time. I got to understand how to put transactions together. I did that for about 10 years, but always wanted to come back to Spokane. And one day I got a call from Dave Clack, my lifelong mentor and a huge community leader. And Dave said, "Hey, Tom, why don't you come back to Spokane and take over this little economic development fund called Spokane Capital Management that was born out of Momentum. They had raised $3 million to invest in Spokane companies. It had been fully invested. The guy that ran it had moved on, and they wanted someone to take it over. I jumped at the opportunity and came back here, and over the next 3 years put together 3 venture funds totaling nearly $200 million, and for a couple of years was one of the more active investors in the state of Washington. I lived in Spokane, but I had an office in Seattle, and the first 5 years, I would say, was really, really fun. My premise when I did this was that the Northwest was under venture capital, and when I kind of formed what was called Northwest Venture Associates, there were only maybe 4 or 5 venture funds in the state of Washington.
Really?
By year 2000, there were maybe 44 venture funds. It got very crowded. The market got hot. Too many dollars chasing too many deals. Right. The market crashed in March of 2000. The next 5 years was, I would not say a joy, not a whole lot of fun. But about that time, Tom Tilford, another community leader, called me up and said, "Hey, Tom, would you want to come teach a class at Gonzaga University?" jumped at the opportunity. And in the very first quarter I taught out there, a young man in my class by the name of Josh Neblett, he and I came up with an idea for a company initially called Green Cupboards. It was intended to operate at the intersection of Consumer Reports and Amazon.com for environmentally sustainable products. He and I came up with that idea. We started the company. We quickly pivoted after a couple of years to focus really just on selling almost anything on the backs of Amazon. I spent the next 8 years growing that company, and we sold it and grew it to over $100 million in revenues and sold it in 2016. And that pretty much catches us up to where we're at now. Even before we had sold, we changed the name from Green Cupboards to E-Tails. Before we sold it, I had kind of taken over the Spokane Angel Alliance. It was called the Delta Angel Group, but I renamed it. So I was doing that, but after we sold the company, I really also focused. I was asked to take over the leadership of Ignite. I did that. I started putting together the KickStart seed funds, and that pretty much brings us up to date.
Gosh. What a track record.
That was a short version.
What a rap sheet. I like it. I mean, that's buttoned up, nice and easy. I'm sure it was just smooth the whole time. No bumps.
No bumps. Also, I would, there's some bumps along the way.
I'm sure. But, I mean, looking at early career, going from traditional kind of CPA accounting work, then to big time investment banking, how did those kind of couple into your curiosity and, maybe interest in startups and like kind of venture investing? Because those are three very different industries.
My dad was kind of a prominent attorney here in Spokane. His biggest client was a Vista, but he was a conservative, and how I kind of ended up doing all of this stuff, I don't really know because it wasn't necessarily in my DNA. I did have a family member, my uncle Hunter Simpson in Seattle, was kind of a well-known entrepreneur. He had started and built a company that was kind of invented the defibrillator. And he was kind of an outgoing, charismatic character in Seattle. So I inherited maybe a little bit of his entrepreneurial interests, but really none of it was planned. I mean, I was a CPA, went to business school, but when I was in Seattle and in the late 80s and kind of got to meet a lot of these entrepreneurs and be involved in their business and kind of helping them secure the capital they needed, that's when I got the bug and kind of learned the art, so to speak.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I'm sure, and there was some sort of learning curve going from, accounting to the, investment banking and then the startup investing world, which is completely different. I mean, what things did you take from accounting and from the M&A side of things, investment banking, into, the investment portion of things?
The accounting part, frankly, I always tell anybody that's kind of going into business, they ought to get their accounting degree because,
it's good to know.
I view a lot of the other things in business as kind of fluff. In finance, for example, once you kind of master net present value, you figured most of it out. But accounting's a real skill. And it's a professional certification, and numbers and financial statements are kind of the music book of business, so to speak. That made the transition pretty easy because I could analyze and understand financial statements pretty quickly. Really, the hardest thing, and when you asked me about the transition, I remember really trying to figure out capital structure. And, people were throwing out all these words: mezz, subdebt, preferred equity, common stock, lines of credit. And I'm trying to figure out, where does all this stuff fit? And, kind of once I figured that out, and the way I kind of figured it out was kind of going from the top of the balance sheet down to the bottom, and the top, particularly on the liability section, that's the cheapest capital, line of credit. You get down in the equity section, it gets more expensive. And once I kind of just figured out all these forms of capital just had a different cost associated with them. And then kind of once I figured that out, then I could put all the pieces together. I could look at a company that is looking to raise capital, and you want to start out, okay, what's the cheapest form of capital? Can they get a line of credit? Nope. Can they get a convertible note? Nope. Okay, they have to do equity. And if they do equity, is it preferred or is it common? So once I figured that out, that really kind of helped capital formation come together and click. And then also when you're doing a merger and trying to put cap tables together and what the new business looks like and what the balance sheet ought to be, figuring that out was made it a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. And then when you're coming from the M&A side and people look at your background and you're, just took over this fund and you're raising new funds. I mean, what was kind of your pitch? Why are you going to people and you're like, listen, I did this, very different, but I'm raising these new funds. What was like the,
that's a very good question. And I was kind of worried about that. Yeah. So before I started raising the first fund, I actually went out and wrote a white paper. And I did a lot of research and analyzed the amount of capital that companies in the Northwest, primarily Washington and Oregon, were raising over the last 3 to 5 years. And then I looked at where that capital came from. And in this white paper, I was able to demonstrate that, frankly, there was a huge void in the state of Washington for venture capital, that most of these businesses were importing their capital from outside the region. So thereby, there's a void. We needed to have more capital up here.
Yeah, and people don't like that. Locals want to be like, local support, local state pride, all that. So, which I'm sure a lot of people didn't even know. Yeah.
So that really armed me with why there was a need, why there was a void in the market. But nonetheless, as I was kind of going out and raising that first fund, I was worried, I was sweating, and I'll never forget, and I don't think this individual will mind if I publicly state his name, but one of the first meetings I had was with Bobby Brett. I had never met Bobby. Of course, I'd heard all about him, and I had been introduced to him, and we met at the Olive Garden for lunch.
Okay.
And I showed up, and I must have just been perspiring and looking nervous and probably talking fast. And finally, Bobby said, "Hey, Tom, slow down.
Just relax.
I'm going to invest in your fund, okay? Now, just tell me about your background and all of this." And I just remember that was just so calming and so helpful. And frankly, that's kind of like the audience I got. People were really very interested in having a local source of capital.
Yeah, definitely. And for people that don't know, Bobby Brett owns, or maybe not owns wholly anymore, but it was Indians, Chiefs,
and lots of
various other things.
And just a fabulous individual.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then so you're kind of putting the pieces together, getting the fund structure together. What was the pitch on, types of companies you were going after, stage of companies? Were you going after kind of more earlier stage or later stage? Where did that all kind of land?
It's similar to what I'm doing right now, given, the first fund was really kind of more Northwest based. As I raised the two other funds, I did kind of broaden it more to kind of Seattle and Portland. But when you've got a reasonably small sandbox in which you are investing, you can't have super tight investment criteria.
Right.
Like if I said, "Hey, I'm only going to invest in early stage SaaS businesses that are doing artificial intelligence for the financial industry," I'd probably make one investment every 3 years.
Right.
So I've always and when I was an investment banker, I was a generalist. So I've always looked at my investment criteria as being people, ideas, and markets. Really kind of trying to find creative, talented, hardworking, tenacious people. Look for ideas that are proprietary, robust, novel, looking for markets that are growing, not cluttered with competition, and markets which you can deploy a profitable business model. So that's today, I kind of look at people, ideas, and markets. Then there's stage right now, and really kind of looking at the earlier stage, because again, that's where there's a void. That first round of capital, particularly for a Spokane company, is the hardest round to come by. Now, if you're doing $2 to $5 million in revenues and the world's awash with capital, you can go anywhere. You don't need a local source. So I'm kind of blending then and now, but always kind of try to find where the void is and not trying to really compete with other larger sources of capital.
Yeah. And so in those early days and you're making some of the first investments, what were some of the criteria that hit the check boxes for some of the early winners? Was it the team? You're looking at, we talked about markets a little bit. I mean, what patterns did those first early companies
probably a good
have?
example is packet engines. One of the investments that fund made was in packet engines. Bernard Daines, a credentialized entrepreneur in networking, had already sold one company, Grand Junction, to Cisco. Now he was starting a new company. Also at the time, I invested in packet engines. The deal was being led by Mayfield. So that's a great example. Here's a company with a credentialized entrepreneur, a growing market, and a deal that had really good co-investors in it.
Nice. And then bringing you back to Spokane.
Yep.
Teaching at Gonzaga. I mean, what was the thought process? You're running this venture fund, you're wheeling and dealing, burning markets across Washington State, and now you're teaching at Gonzaga. I mean, what was the thought process behind?
Okay. You know, I actually always wanted to teach. Yeah? I was, everyone is always thinking about other things that they might enjoy doing. In the back of my mind, teaching was something I always kind of wanted to do. And actually, that first class, it was me and John Paraso taught it together.
Okay.
And it was, they provided us kind of an open syllabus. They could, they basically said, you guys talk about whatever you want.
It's dangerous.
And we brought in guest speakers, and we kind of had them come up with some mock projects and build mock business plans. And it was very rewarding. And many of the individuals in that class I still see regularly.
That's awesome. That's very cool. So then Josh Neblett in that class. He brings up this idea. I mean, what was the spark? What was the idea that you were like, this might be something?
Well, I'll tell you, the way it actually transpired is I taught the class was 1 day a week, and for the next week, the topic was going to be an elevator pitch. Okay. And I was going to have the kids come up with an elevator pitch for a company that they made up. And as I was thinking about that class, I was out at my summer home. And I had a bunch of people over. And at the end of the evening, everyone was kind of going, hey, where do you put the cans and the bottles and recyclables? And I said, frankly, at my lake cabin, I'm not really set up to do that. But I was just noticing how everybody wanted to be really environmentally friendly in their daily activities. So it kind of dawned on me, what if there was a place where people could buy environmentally friendly products that are truly vetted as being sustainable? And nothing like that really existed. This was kind of the next morning. I'm thinking about it. It was a super rainy day out there, so I really had nothing to do. So I kind of went to GoDaddy, and I started thinking about, green store, green warehouse, green shop. None of those names were available, but I did find green cupboards, which would be a place where you could put green products in your kitchen or your pantry. And I thought to myself, well, God, this would just be a great example of an elevator pitch I can give to the class. So I went up and gave this elevator pitch, and I still have a copy of it. And after class, Josh came up to me and said, hey, Tom, I really like that idea. Okay. Can I write a business plan for you? And I said, sure. I'm probably not going to do anything with it. And he came back like 2 weeks later with, people back then, people wrote business plans. And he had like a nice 20-page business plan. And I was really admired the effort he put into it. So I reciprocated. I still remember specifically sitting around my kitchen table and going through his business plan and taking notes and giving him hints. And I gave it back to him. Not really knowing what we were going to do with it. And he said, you know what, why don't we enter this in the business plan competition between, Whitworth and GU and Eastern and the community colleges? Well, he did, and he got first place. After he won, there was kind of a nice little reception afterwards, and his mom and dad were there, and I went up and shook his hand and said, hey, Josh, that was fun, have a great career, and let's keep in touch, thinking I'd probably never see the kid again. He goes, well, no, let's start this company. And I go, oh, okay. I go, I've got some office space that you guys can go use if you want. And like 2 weeks later, I come to work one day, and he's there with a couple of other students from Gonzaga, and didn't really have a whole lot of dialogue with them. I was just kind of letting him use my conference room. And every morning I'd show up, and there'd be pizza boxes and Coke cans, maybe an occasional beer can, and they were doing whatever they were doing. And then one day Josh came to me, and Josh is, if you've met Josh, he's actually a very direct individual. He's not a lot of small talk, get to the point. Well, this day I walked in, and he's kind of hemming and hawing and not looking at me in the eye, and finally I go, hey, Josh, what is it? Because I was kind of in a hurry too. I didn't really have a whole lot of time and he goes, well, we need some capital to get this company started. Would you be interested in perhaps putting some money in? And I was kind of getting prepared, thinking that might happen.
Sure.
And I said, sure, but I'm going to give you 3 rules, and you've got to promise to follow these 3 rules. I said, every budget you give me, you are going to at least meet it and hopefully exceed it. Number 2, we're going to raise as little capital as possible.
Yeah.
When I was a venture capitalist, I saw, unfortunately, so much money kind of go to waste.
Yeah.
I won't go through all the reasons,
Sure.
You see it sometimes too.
All the time.
And then number 3, I said, we're going to be profitable as soon as we can. And those 3 things really came from lessons, scars on my back from my days as a venture capitalist.
Yeah.
So I go, Josh, I will invest and I will help you raise the first round of capital. But you have to follow those 3 rules. And he looked at me and goes, oh, okay, yep, sounds good.
Well, at that point, he's probably thinking, oh my God, I just got money. Like, I don't care what these 3 rules
exactly.
are. Like, I'm going to do whatever you say.
That was true. But I will tell you, he followed all of those rules. And quite honestly, it's almost kind of a simultaneous equation that very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But our first round of capital was $288,000. We were profitable the very first, not the first year of operation, but the very first full year of operation, we were profitable. He used to sign his budgets every year, and he beat every single one of them. Okay. We didn't raise more capital until the company hit $26 million in revenues. Gosh. We raised like another $1 million. Yeah. And so by the time we sold the company, when we were over $100 million in revenues, we'd only raised $1.5 million in equity.
That is insane.
So all 3 of those rules I gave him, he and the team followed to a T.
That's crazy.
Now I forgot the question, but that's the story.
I don't remember what the question was. My follow-up question is, okay, so you're at $26 million in revenue for the year. Why do you raise more money?
We wanted to accelerate our growth. I mean, we were growing quite quickly. Yeah. We were profitable, but and that's back when I was deeply involved in kind of watching the cash flows, and we would watch it on a weekly basis. Yeah. And sometimes that got a little nervous, and so we figured we needed a little bit more gas in the tank, so we weren't constantly on edge. Right.
And so you're kind of with him step by step. You're going through this thing that you really didn't think was going to turn into anything. I
always refer to it as a science project.
As a science project. It's a very good science project. It worked out well. What was your role as an investor, as kind of an advisor, partner, once they were kind of off into the races? Were you
my official title was executive chairman. Okay. And it's in a terminology that people might better understand, I was a grandparent.
Just making sure everything was going right.
I didn't have to really make sure the trains ran on time, although I did sometimes. But Josh ran the company, and he and I the whole time had our desks right next to each other. Yeah. I was there regularly, but we had just a marvelous relationship. Yeah. And we counterbalance each other very well.
That's awesome. That's so great. I know they still talk about that at Gonzaga. I'll let you know every time somebody brings up some entrepreneurial success story, that company and Josh and yourself are brought up probably on a weekly basis, guaranteed. And so, you get to the end of that huge success of something that was kind of happenstance. Yep. And then taking over Ignite. Yep. What was Ignite before kind of you took it over? Was it same-ish model? Did they still have the loan funds? What kind of did that look like to what it looks like
Ignite now? Has actually been around for a little over 25 years. Okay. And it had done a number of things to help and guide and stimulate growth with entrepreneurs and founders in the community. They had one loan fund they got in 2007, and then during my tenure, we got another one. When I took it over in 2019, I really focused it on funding, accelerating, and mentoring emerging companies in the Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, and Sandpoint region. By funding, we had the loan funds. By accelerating, we put together a number of programs, Ignite Talks, Meet the Investors, Lunch at the Loft. And then we put together kind of a proprietary group of mentors that I could introduce selectively to certain founders. And I view mentorship is like friendship. You can't really force it. Sure. So I would, if someone was looking for a mentor, I would offer to introduce them to somebody. But what became of it, I really had really no influence over.
Hands clean.
So yeah.
And so now you have roles in Ignite, SAA, KickStart funds.
Yep.
How do those kind of interplay with each other, collaborate with one another? Because they're all kind of circling around a common goal, a common theme.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, if you look at each of the entities, I mean, the SAA is primarily, it's a angel network membership group that meets 5 times a year and hears presentations from 3 companies at each launch meeting. And the primary focus of that entity is to enable regional companies to secure capital from local angel investors. And I've been kind of keeping track of the numbers over the years, and it's really been very effective. I think last year, companies that presented to the SAA raised about $26.4 million. Wow. So it's been a very effective way for companies to secure local capital. Now, at the same point in time, a lot of the people that attend the SAA lunches are accountants, lawyers, and real estate people, insurance firms, because it takes all of those professions in addition to capital for a young company to be successful. So that's the SAA. Ignite has, we owned a building in the University District, which we sold this year to WSU, and as kind of part of that partnership and some of the grants that came with it, we did some programming. But now going forward, Ignite is going to focus specifically solely on its loan funds. These 2 loan funds, I think they aggregate about $4.5 million, and since inception, they've put about $13 million into about 35 companies. Wow. And I would say most of the successful emerging companies in Spokane have at some point in time tapped a loan from the loan fund. So Ignite is exclusively focused on providing loans to these emerging companies. And then the KickStart Angel Funds, I named them KickStart because as I was managing the Spokane Angel Alliance, one thing I was observing is companies would present, members of the Spokane Angel Alliance were interested in participating, but there wasn't a lead investor.
Sure.
So
it's always scary to go first.
So I thought, okay, if there's a KickStart fund to kickstart the investment process and the matching of angels and companies, that's why I put that fund together, or that family of funds. Now I'm on the 5th one. So the KickStart Angel Funds are primarily focused on investing in companies in the Spokane region at a fairly early stage. Generally in partnership with members of the SAA or in partnership with other funds in the region.
Definitely. When you're investing now versus when you're investing, kind of in the early 2000s, is your mindset of which companies are going to be successes versus failures, or the patterns that you're looking for, has that shifted at all? Or is that kind of similar mentality kind of through the years of what worked then still works now? You just keep on
I would say the fundamentals are the same. When I first started doing this, ironically, I was never really trained as a venture capitalist. I started a venture fund, but I had no venture capital experience. I had investment banking experience. I'd been around a lot of entrepreneurs. I would like to say that, kind of 25 years, or really, I raised the first fund in 1995. So I'd like to say 30 years later, I'm a bit better. I would say my fundamentals are the same, but maybe the more subjective artificial intelligence part of it, pattern recognition has gotten better. One thing that really stands out at me, very early on, I tended to probably invest in what I will call companies that, whereas the CEO was just kind of, dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's and, said all the right things. And I'm trying to say this properly, but I think to be super successful, you've got to be a little edgy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you color outside the lines. Not that you break any rules,
Sure.
not that you do anything unethical,
Sure.
but you stretch the limits and the boundaries. You create new rules. I mean, think of Elon Musk and others. And in my early days, I think some of those people I found to be just a little too edgy, a little too unruly. In our work, what do we say that they're hard to accept input with.
Sure.
And I've learned.
It's a good way to put that.
There's another word that we use that's escaping me right now. But I have really learned that a lot of the very successful companies, you know what? The CEOs oftentimes kind of do their own things. They might listen to the board, they might listen to me, but they might just do their own thing.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that flexibility. So I respect. I respect those that might be a little bit more colorful than I did last time. I think another thing early on, I was wowed by big name VCs or big name investors that might be joining the cap table. I'm no longer starstruck by that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for them, it's a numbers game, right? So they're tossing out all these checks, and other people are like, oh my God, well, they're in it, so there must be, and they're just like, we're tossing out a few.
Yeah.
So that totally makes sense. I mean, given what you've seen in Washington State, your time in Pennsylvania, your time kind of around in the area, I mean, how do you pitch and look at founders in Spokane versus founders elsewhere? Maybe in Seattle, maybe in the Bay Area. I mean, what about Spokane makes it a great place to build your company, to live, to kind of plant your flag as this is where?
Well, I think those are kind of two different questions. There's Spokane or the region as a place to start a company. And then there's founders. And, I don't have any different standard for a founder in Spokane than I might have for a founder in Seattle or the Bay Area. And there are a lot of fascinating people that have moved into Spokane. So to answer your question, I'll use an example. A couple of years ago, I got a call from Pioneer Square Labs in Seattle, kind of one of the top accelerators or incubators or whatever you want to call them. And they were closing around for a company called SecureSave, and they were looking for investors, and they invited me to participate. And I got to know the founder of the company, Devin Miller.
He was on the podcast a couple months ago.
He was.
I got to have him back on now that he's a big shot now.
Yep. So I invested in the company. I got to know Devin. And shortly after I invested, Devin called me up one day and said, hey, Tom, tell me more about Spokane.
It's always a good call to get.
It is. Yeah. And I've had a few of those over the years. And so I answered his question and talked about how wonderful I think the region is. Yeah. And he moved to Spokane. And he very successfully built his company, successfully raised outside capital, and successfully had an exit. Yeah. So it can happen here in Spokane. I recently invested in a company called Geared in Sandpoint. They also raised outside capital and were just voted or ranked by Deloitte and Touche as number 9 on their list of the 500 fastest growing companies. Wow. So it can be done in Spokane. Yeah. And when I think of Spokane, I really think of a region, Spokane to Coeur d'Alene to Sandpoint and all points in between. So it's a region. It's not just Spokane.
Sure.
And I don't need to list them all, but the quality of life here with the schools, the neighborhoods, the universities, the outdoor activities, the lakes is incredible. So if you are competing for talent and you want to recruit somebody, it's pretty hard to compete against the big companies on compensation and stock options and all that. Imagine if you can compete on a different plane. You're competing on quality of life. And so that's what I kind of really preach to about this area. Move to Spokane, start a company here, and all of a sudden you have one more arrow in your quiver in terms of how you can get key employees. Now, the other great thing is, employees don't necessarily need to move here anymore. We have all the tools for remote work, and actually Devin did that very successfully.
I was going to say, whole remote team.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
we talked about that a little bit. I've been hearing, more and more people, so I have a lot of friends that, just moved here and they go to law school or they're in graduate school or whatever. And so many people are coming from, the West Side, from Arizona, California, wherever. And they're like, people are they're so nice here. Yep. They're like, you don't get that. And I'm like, no, I don't get that. Cause I've gone everywhere else, but not, maybe not lived in the areas or whatever. But for the people that live here, for, the closeness to, mountains, lakes, all of you said, it's becoming a place where people are kind of like, it's kind of uncovered gem a little bit.
Yep.
When you're looking at the region, are there gaps or certain things that the community could do better? Maybe you're hoping for in the next 5-10 years to kind of uplift the growing categories of industry, of, companies coming up. What can Spokane do as a whole to kind of bolster up the companies that are trying to build here?
Well, that's kind of probably one of my favorite topics. As you know, there's a handful of us in Spokane, you included, and Sky and Steve at Cowles, and Bill at Launchpad, and some of the other groups in town that are all working, collaborating very closely to help our entrepreneurs and founders and startup companies. But what we don't have as a community, what you otherwise might see in Bend, Oregon, or Boulder, Colorado, or Austin, or the early days when I was in Seattle, is a community of policymakers and business leaders that have made entrepreneurship a key, if not the number one priority for their city. Their number one economic development priority. Imagine a region or a city here, and you know everybody very well, where we're all aligned.
Yeah.
We are in agreement that our number one economic development objective is entrepreneurs and startups and founders. All our messaging is around that. We're working toward that. I think this region would see even more startups and founders moving here. A region is no different than the product portfolio of a large corporation, where you look at a large company, and many large companies have their cash cows right now. Their products are just spinning off lots of cash, big fat gross margins. But they're also smart enough to know that the life cycle of those cash cows is not finite.
Yeah.
And as a result, they're constantly fueling the rising stars. The next products or services in their portfolio, they're going to be the cash cows. We as a region need to be thinking about that. We're losing so many of our big employers here. Most recently, PotlatchDeltic gets acquired or merged with a company in Florida. And you can go back in time and see many of these companies getting acquired and moving elsewhere. Yeah. We need, like a large corporation, need to be priming the pump and fueling the rising stars. Yeah. So that's the one thing I would like to see changed in this community.
Agreed. And I feel like people ask me that because we talk to people over in Seattle, and they're always asking, how is Spokane doing? Like, what?
Yep.
I've been hearing bubbling up and bubbling, but it just seems like you guys are so close, but you're not quite what's the problem? And I say the exact same thing. I say it's not everyone. It's like the city's fighting each other.
Yep.
It's like not everyone's on the same page. Not everyone wants the same thing. And so
I do want to make a plug though. As you know, I've got my 25+5 coming up in Fuel Co-working to honor and acknowledge and celebrate the 30 fastest growing companies in the region. I invited Mayor Brown to come and make some introductory remarks, and she graciously accepted.
Perfect.
So I'm super excited to have her there, and I think I believe she shares my vision as well. She has been hampered by some other more pressing issues here in Spokane.
Sure.
So I will give everybody the benefit of the doubt in hoping that sometime we can get aligned around that economic development initiative.
I love it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that event. It should be a really great one. So if anyone's listening out there that wants to come to the event, it should be a fantastic time. I think that's all I have for you today.
Okay.
I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and hopefully we'll have you back on.
Good. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
All right.